All right, I want to welcome everyone to this week's meeting of the Clyde Sukeforth Chapter of SABR. I am Bruce McClure, the chapter chair, and we always hold our meetings in conjunction with the Gardner-Waterman Chapter of SABR in Vermont, Dr. Clayton Truder, chair. So got a few things to go over before we really get started. I want to talk to everybody about September 28th for just a moment. On Saturday, September 28th, a titan of sports journalism will be appearing here at our home in New London, New Hampshire. Melissa Lutke will be here, and she will be discussing her book, Locker Room Talk. We're hoping that we're going to have a big crowd. We want to invite everyone to our home for this meeting. If you have any questions, please feel free to give me an email at bruce@brucemcclurenh.com at any time. Happy to go over that with you. Now, the second thing I want to go over is something that's pretty near and dear to my heart. As everybody knows, Art Springsteen passed away this past May, and he bequeathed to us a rather large treasure trove of baseball books. And, well, it's ready for everyone to enjoy. Tonight, I would like to debut the Art Springsteen Memorial Lending Library. Our librarian is here this evening. It is my wife, Molly. It actually keeps her out of trouble and gives her something to do. If you are looking for a piece that you would like to take out and read or use for your own research, you got in your email today an extensive spreadsheet that shows you exactly what we have for you. The lending library is free, and you can contact Molly anytime if you have any questions or you'd like to take a book out. Molly's email address is mollymcclurenh@gmail.com. Now, I want to turn it over to the membership out here for a moment. Is there anybody here who's working on any projects or has anything that they would like to share with our membership on what they're doing? Paul, was that a hand up? Paul Allen, was that a hand up? Paul is gesticulating at me. I'm not sure. So, Paul, unmute yourself, and let's see if we can get him on camera, and he can tell us what's going on. I will. Let's see if I can give Paul a quick little hand here. I just asked him to unmute. We can tap dance for a minute. I'm good at that. There he is. Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing great. All I wanted to tell you is I would like, before the speaker gets going, to tell you or ask you, will you email me the address or a phone number of somebody in Ottawa? Because they're supposed to have a chapter meeting tomorrow, and I'm not getting any response. And I want to, click in with those guys.
I will do that.
That's the first thing. The second thing is, just want to tell everybody, because you guys were the first to host me for a meeting, a book talk. I've done a lot since that time. I was in Cooperstown and did a talk for the Cooperstown SABR meeting, and also got scheduled for one in Casey Stengel in New York City, but we had technical problems. I didn't have your wife to help us with that one, but that's going to be scheduled again. And everything's rolling along really well. So that's what I wanted to say. But thank you for, the original time to do the book talk. It really motivated me. I've enjoyed it. I haven't been able to attend all of your things, but I follow you guys in your schedules, all the things you're doing. And congratulations, Bruce, to you and your chapter. You guys are on fire, and I'm really glad I'm a part of it.
Paul. Thank you for that. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that there is no truth to the rumor that Truder is starting, that I have stock in Brill Cream. I just want to get that out there. Anybody else? Ryan, you had your hand up. Are you good, or did you have something you'd like to share with us this evening as well? Ryan McClanahan, give me a thumbs up or down if you're good. Okay, hit your unmute yourself. Go. You are having a microphone malfunction right now, Ryan. We cannot hear you, so we're going to get back to you in just a little bit before the meeting ends. So what I want to do right now is talk about our featured guest. Johnny Mize was one of the greatest hitters in baseball's golden age of great hitters. Born and raised in tiny Demorest, Georgia, in the northeast Georgia mountains, Mize emerged from the heart of Dixie as a Bunyonesque slugger, a quiet but sharp-witted man from a broken home who became a professional player at 17, embarking on an extended tour of the expansive St. Louis Cardinals minor league system. Tabbed as a can't-miss Hall of Famer, then all but forgotten, Mize spent 28 years waiting for the call from Cooperstown before he was finally inducted in 1981, delighting fans with his straightforward commentary and sly sense of humor during a memorable induction speech. SABR member Jerry Grillo, author of Big Cat, The Life of Baseball Hall of Famer Johnny Mize, learned how to type on a manual Smith Corona and learned how to write while toiling for newspapers in Illinois, New York, Georgia, New York again, South Carolina, Georgia again, Pennsylvania, and Georgia again. That's a mouthful. Along the way, he won a bunch of writing awards from different press associations and realized his dream of being a country newspaper editor. He was an editor at Georgia Trend magazine for almost 15 years, winning a bunch of regional and national awards for stories about business, politics, the environment, sports, music. But the best part was he got to interview Jimmy Carter, John Lewis, and get this, Henry Aaron. Grillo has also worked as a freelance writer for a variety of other publications, including ESPN.com. These days, he works for the Georgia Institute of Technology, where he writes about science mostly. But when he's not working, he's obsessing over baseball minutia. And I'm exhausted after that. Jerry Grillo, welcome to Northern New England, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Hi, Northern New England. I miss Northern New England. I'm originally a New Yorker who used to drive a lot up into Northern New England with my wife-to-be. Look at that book. I know that book.
I just want to get this out there before Jerry begins. I have a copy of Big Cat right here. Jerry holds the distinction of being the first author that we have had on to donate a copy of his book in Art's name to our lending library. Jerry, I want to thank you for this. We won't forget that.
Thank you. I'm so glad to. When you told me about Art and about the library, just completely honored and my pleasure and then some. Thank you so much, y'all, for having me. From way down here in Dixie to way up there in Yankee Land, which is again part of my home country, at least from the New York point of view. But you guys probably want to hear about Johnny Mize, and I put together a short sort of slide presentation to break the ice, if you will, and grease the skids. And, a couple of stories that were interesting to me. The whole thing was interesting to me, the whole process and the man's life and career. But these were some of the highlights that I found as a researcher as I was working on this. And that's mostly what these photos will reflect. So without too much further ado, while I figure out how to run this computer machine.
He's doing fine.
Let's see, slideshow, play from the start. So this is a blank slide, as you can see. But what I've called this is tracking the big cat. Some stories, a few stories behind the stories. And what you have here is Johnny Mize's home called Diamond Acre. This was where he was born in Demorest in 1913, and then where he died in 1993. He moved back here after being away for many years and having his adventures as a baseball player and then as an orange grower years later. But this is where he became sort of a Mayberry-esque, figure in this small town. And this is Johnny. This is interesting. This is him as I think a basketball player or at least a PE student at Piedmont College. He's probably 15 or 16 in this photo. And he was already playing college sports. It was such a small town and a small school, they could get away with these things. And if you had a hulking teenager who could hit the ball 400 feet and make a jump shot, then you were on the team. And that's kind of what happened with Johnny. And here he is a couple of years later playing for the Elmira Ball Club in the famous Cardinals chain gang system that Bruce alluded to earlier. He was in the minor leagues for 6 years, and this is Here he is about at the age of 19, I think. Now here's Johnny playing for the Rochester Red Wings, the AAA team for the Cardinals back in the day. And this is in the early 30s. Here he is slugging and is a member of the team. Guys mugging probably during spring training. But then this is where it gets interesting to me anyway. One of the more interesting things about Mize's life that was little known, because Johnny just was not much of a talker, was the winter he spent in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. It was a story that came to light when Mize was probably near the end of his life, and a historian asked him, who was the best player you ever saw? This was just something that sports writers and others didn't ask Johnny. And he said he thought about it for about a second and said it was a black man from Cuba named Martin Diego. And I played for his ball club in the Dominican Republic back, and Johnny's memory was messed up. And it was a short comment, but it really helped drive my interest as I was researching. Here's a picture of Diego, the legend. Many of you have heard of him. He was a superstar in his time. Was a great pitcher, dominant hitter, very much the Ohtani of his time. And here's Mize as a Red Wing. This would have been his age when he was playing with Diego. And then this next picture here is Mize wearing the Concordia uniform, which was the ball club that Martin was managing, that he recruited Mize to play with. He recruited him off of his barnstorming team from Richmond to play on this team that was actually based in Venezuela, owned by the son of a dictator in Venezuela, but was built out of superstars from the Negro Leagues and Latin America, and at least two white ball players from the major leagues, and that would have been Johnny Mize and his teammate who's Jimmy Jordan, who's a utility infielder for the Brooklyn Dodgers. By the time Johnny left the Dominican Republic, the local press was calling him the best player of the visiting ball players. And when he left, he had a pretty good replacement to help carry the team to the finish line, if you will. Johnny left before the finals, before Rafael Trujillo, the governor himself, the dictator himself, was there. His replacement was a man named Josh Gibson. So this was a team that was well stocked before, during, and after Johnny Mize. Now, of course, a couple of years later, Mize made his debut in the major leagues and was an immediate hit. And you can see his first 10 seasons, the kind of numbers that he put up were ridiculous, right? They're Hall of Fame caliber numbers, no argument. Batting average, on base percentage, all of these things. And this was during his years with the Giants and first with the Cardinals and then with the Giants, where he also apparently caught the attention of this cartoonist journalist who liked to feel his muscles. So, but he was quite the slugger, all around superstar. What this doesn't show is the 3 years that he missed in the middle of his career, of the prime of his career in the military, because something called World War II came along, and Johnny served not with a rifle but with a bat. And here's Johnny with L.B. Fletcher, he played for a great New England team called the Boston Braves back in the day. Fletcher was a first baseman, but here's Johnny probably giving L.B. some batting tips. And then, as you can see, Johnny needed some dieting tips he did famously gain a lot of weight because he was a big player to begin with. Johnny was known as a husky ball player, but he did put on about 30 or 40 pounds while in the military, which tells me he wasn't doing much but playing baseball. And I don't know how much calisthenics he was doing, but he famously gained a lot of weight and then lost it all just before the 1946 season, when he came back to the Giants, enjoyed some of his greatest years, set up a lot of records during his next couple of seasons with the Giants. And then, of course, spent the end of his career with the Yankees. And what interested me about this is, look at Mize's numbers are way down. Of course, he was a part-time player, an older player by baseball terms, and from 35 to 40 here. And And he was a part-time player, a pinch hitter, a role player, which was the Yankees were famous for employing these kinds of ball players in those years, Casey's first years. And look at how many pennants and World Series he won. So all those years Johnny had when he was one of the best hitters in the world, he didn't have a single pennant to his name. His last 5 years as a part-time role player, he's got 5 World Series. So I think he was very happy with the way he ended his career. And then I just wanted to show you a couple of the interesting Mize trivia that came to light as I was working on this book. I'd always heard that Mize was related in some way to Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb, and I found out how. And he was related to both of these men, the two original baseball Hall of Famers, and the Big Cat was related to both of them. The Babe was married to Johnny's second cousin or first cousin once removed. I'm not sure how you figure that out, but Johnny's cousin Claire, who was actually Johnny's father's first cousin, was Babe's wife, the famous Claire Ruth. And so Johnny always referred to him as Cousin George. He'd go visit Cousin George at their Riverside apartment in the city when John was a Giant and a Yankee. So they were good pals. And the Babe actually was rooting for Johnny to break his home run record the one year that Johnny came close. And over here on the other side, you have Ty Cobb, and Johnny and Ty were related by blood, also on Johnny's father's side of the family. So that was I found that to be kind of interesting. And that was a fun short part in an early part of the book. And then another even stranger in some ways trivia was the Big Cat's relationship to the Beatles. And that's what's funny here is the man in the middle of the Beatles here is Murray Kaufman, who was Johnny's business manager when Johnny was a Yankee and co-wrote or probably wrote most of Johnny's book, How to Hit, which was kind of a hit in its time. It was a popular book among kids, among 12, 13, 14-year-olds who wanted to play ball. And Murray Kaufman was the guy who was the as told to in this book. Murray was better known as Murray the K, a friend of the Beatles, the DJ who helped sort of launch the Beatles when they came to New York. So that's another strange Mize connection. And then here we go. Mize gets back to Demorest, and he spends his final years after having grown oranges and lost a wife in a tragic accident, his first wife. They had become estranged, and she died, and he met another woman and adopted her children, and went on to live here in Demorest, and here they are, where the city honored him with a plaque, among other things. His street's named after him. And there's a museum. There's a small museum in the Johnny Mize Athletic Center at Piedmont, now Piedmont University, where they have some pretty cool memorabilia, uniforms, balls. This is just a small piece of it. This is from the grand opening. This is Johnny Mize's son, his stepson, Jim Mize, who was also a good ball player in his day, played a year of minor league ball, was a great, invaluable source for me in writing the book, was gracious with his time and with his stories. And here he is 24 years ago with a son who is now married. And Jim is a grandfather. And here's Judy Mize, who is a big reason the book exists. I was always a baseball fan. I think I always knew who Johnny Mize was because my father was a baseball fan, and I grew up hearing stories of the old Yankees teams, and from other uncles who were, Dodgers and Giants fans, remember Johnny in the National League. I grew up knowing who this guy was. I had no idea when I moved to where I now live that Johnny Mize, lived and died a few miles away. And when I was the local newspaper editor, I met Judy Mize, and we got to talking. And I can tell you more about that later if you'd like to know how the book came to be. But Judy passed away 3 years ago, but here she is using one of Johnny's bats as a cane because she had MS. Judy struggled with MS for many years, but she was not shy about using some of Johnny's memorabilia to get her. And these are two of Mize's biggest fans: my cat, the little cat Mookie, and my son Joe, who is a mighty man himself. And here's the book, which you can get anywhere that you can get books, of course, including yours truly. If you'd like to get a signed copy, I've got a few on hand, and I'm glad if you want to reach out later or something like that to send you a signed copy. And that's really it. That's it for the slide presentation. And I really I was going to kind of leave it up to you guys here as well. It was a short bit from the book. It's less than 2 minutes. Maybe it's a minute and 50 seconds. I was going to see if you wanted to hear from that. I don't know if you want to hear about.
Absolutely. Are you kidding me? Absolutely, Jerry.
All right, we'll do it. This is the beginning of chapter 17 called
Perfect.
Chasing. And, you know, since we just talked about the babe, why not? This is called Chasing the Babe. And this is the opening bit from that chapter. It is morning in Boston, and the big cat rolls out of his bed in the Hotel Kenmore, fumbles for his cigars, lights one, and starts puffing. Even before the first sip of coffee, particularly when on the road, he starts the day with a cigar. The pungent smoke surrounds his moon head, fills the room. Behind him, in the other bed, Bill Rigney stirs, blinks, grimaces, waves at the smoke, says, "Oh, swell, John." Grumbling, he turns away from his Giants teammate, pulling the covers over his head. Johnny Mize ignores his teammate, walks to the window overlooking Commonwealth Avenue, lifts the shade. "Gotta check the wind," he says under his breath, opening the window, letting the cool April morning air and the sound of traffic below rush in to fill the room with his cigar smoke. From up here on the 6th floor, Mize can see Fenway Park 3 blocks away. More important, he can see its center field flagpole rising above the green monster, Old Glory with her 13 stripes and 48 stars, flapping in the wind. Johnny stares a minute, studying. He grins. "The wind will be blowing out today," he says out loud. Rigney grunts. The Giants are playing the Braves later, and Braves Field is a mile or so down Commonwealth, but Johnny believes he can read the wind, and he's feeling confident. He stretches, just like a big cat, the cigar clenched in his jaw, shuts the window, turns to Rigney and says, "Roomy, I'm going to hit 1 or 2 today." Then Johnny grabs the morning paper from out in the hall to read the box scores and find out what Musial did yesterday. And that's how that chapter opens.
Gary, tell us a little bit about how you came to choose Mize as the subject of this book. What inspired you to write about Johnny?
Wow. You know, it's a long story that I'll keep short. For starters, the Willie Mays books, the great Willie Mays books had already been written. So there's that. And that was, you know, Willie was my first favorite player. I mean, like so many people, right? But that was the first guy I knew of and was aware of, and sort of he fed my interest. While my dad and these old men I was telling you about, my uncles, would be sitting around the poker table talking about these old teams from the 40s, 30s even, and 40s and 50s. And so Willie would crop up in some of those discussions, but more to the point, it would be Duke Snyder, Jackie Robinson, Roy Campanella from that side of the family. My dad was a Yankees guy, so it would be DiMaggio, Rizzuto. Being Italian, those guys were important to him. But Mize kept coming up, and Dad had a real special sort of place in his heart for Mize because he was the first of those hired guns that the Yankees brought on, you know, during Casey Stengel's first run with the Yankees when they became that dynasty. And they became known for bringing on these older ball players to become part-timers. Well, you know, frankly, it pissed a lot of them off, you know, who wanted to play full-time, but it kept them hungry, and they won 5 championships in a row. Well, Mize was one of the guys who enjoyed being a part-time player. He was old and injured. By that time in his career, he was a designated hitter before such a thing existed. You know, he played in the field only by necessity, you know, when one of the backup first basemen couldn't play or something, because he was slow and hurt by then, basically. So this is the guy I grew up hearing about. I fast forward and I see him in an old timers game at Atlanta Stadium years ago. And there he is stretching in in a Cardinals uniform, one of those 70s polyester uniforms. And he's, big guy, and dad's, fascinated with him and, telling me more of this stuff. Fast forward 25 years later, and I become editor at the weekly paper in Habersham County, where Mize grew up. And one of the first calls I get out of the blue is Judy Mize. And she said, I don't know if you've heard of my father, that kind of thing. And so that led to a friendship. And we did the story. She had pitched a story about her dad, who had died years earlier. And the story was something about Wheaties was re-releasing some old boxes, and there was a contest to see which of the old Wheaties champions would be, back on a Wheaties box. And, Babe Ruth and Jackie Robinson were all part of this mix. And Johnny was on the box, I think, in 39 or something. So he was one of the 75 Wheaties champions, and they were excited. And so we wrote a little, typical local newspaper type of story. Local heroes still making a hit, that kind of thing.
Nice.
And but anyway, it led to a friendship, and Judy and I stayed in touch. I moved on and got a job in the magazine business, and at some point asked her, like after I left the paper, hey, because I thought I would have time with the magazine gig now to work on a book. I said, hey, what about doing a book about your dad? And she was very excited to do it. So I started interviewing people like Whitey Ford, Bobby Brown, Bob Bragg, the sports writer, the late great sports writer, a number of these people who are now long gone, to put a book together. I put a few chapters together, and I sent it to a publisher that's still around, that still does a lot of baseball books. And to my surprise, they wanted to do the book. And this is the year 2001. And so I was, this is great. Well, my son was born maybe a couple of weeks after that. 2 weeks. He was born 3 months premature, and he came equipped with a host of disabilities that you just don't. At that time, we couldn't predict these things. And anyway, it just sort of shifted my focus, and I had to tell the publisher, I can't work on this right now. I've got to focus on family, on work, on regular work, full-time work, and put the project down for 20-something years.
Oh, wow.
When life got back to normal and my son stabilized and this kind of thing, I finally did write a book. It was this one. It's a book about a musician, a biography of a musician that did really well. It was happy. Another university press published it. But I never got Mize out of my mind, because I had interviewed these people. I had interviewed Judy at length, and it was actually around the time Judy died in January 2021. And my first book was about to come out.
Mm-hmm.
And I started thinking, okay, I really need to get started on Mize again. And especially with Judy having died, that was like, I can't have wasted her time. I can't have wasted Whitey Ford's time, that kind of thing. And it was sort of like, plus it was a great story. And since the 20-something years ago, Bruce and friends, I learned a whole ton more about this guy. And thanks to the magic of the interwebs, even though I cannot travel as much as I'd like to, my family situation still keeps me close to home. I'm able to go into university databases, newspaper databases, all of the same things that we all have access to, and discover some amazing treasures, right? Like including the thing about Mize and his adventures in the Caribbean. Again, it was stuff that came to light that Judy and Jim, his children, didn't know, so all of this stuff. So it all happened, you know how they say things happen for a reason, and that fallback position. Well, sure enough, whatever the reason was, it was a good one, because I think a lot of material became available that wasn't available in 2001. And that includes papers from the Dominican Republic, other resources that would have, caused a lot more time and effort. Let's put it that way. So it actually turned out, that's sort of how the book came to be. And And yeah, and I never stopped being interested in the subject, and once in a while would research and discover something and here and there and stocked it away.
That sounds like that's a long journey for a book. And I'm
It
not a
really,
writer, and I know that's a long journey for a book. If you have a question for Jerry Grillo tonight, go down to the bottom of the screen and hit the react button. You will see another button that says raise hand. That's what you do. You click that raise hand button. We'll get you in line to ask questions of our author this evening, Jerry Grillo, and his book, Big Cat, The Life of Baseball Hall of Famer Johnny Mize. Andy Heckroth, you had clicked that button first. I'm going to you. Unmute and you're on, man.
All right, there we go. All right. Hey, thank you, Bruce, and thank you, Jerry. I'm just curious, as a St. Louis Cardinals fan who's very interested in Johnny Mize's career, and I apologize in advance, I have not read the book. What was the big reason why Johnny Mize left the St. Louis Cardinals? And I apologize, I should have researched that before this meeting, but I'm just curious, what was the big reason why Johnny Mize left the St. Louis Cardinals because he was a good player for them?
It was, it goes back to the oldest reason in the world, money. Mize was never shy about holding out, first of all, and he held out most years with the Cardinals. Of course, Branch Rickey was also known for being Rickey and owner Sam Braden were renowned for being sort of tight with the dollar, right? And so Mize wasn't shy about, say, holding out, including, after his first year. And so I think they got tired of that. And Branch Rickey also, he's not one of baseball's only true geniuses for nothing, right? So one of the things he did was he would make a little money whenever he sold a guy. He made 10% on a sale of a player. And so if he could sell a player who was still at sort of top value, he was going to make a little more money on the deal. And so this really does come down to money more than anything else. Because Mize went on to have some great years. And if you look at some of the things that people like Stan Musial said for years, they regretted that. Because as great as the Cardinals were after Mize left, and they were great, Musial contends that we would have won 5 more pennants with him. So imagine what that would have done to baseball history. We might have been saying Casey who, so.
Right.
But anyway, that's my reason why he left the Cardinals.
Thank you, Jerry.
Let's go to Gardner-Waterman Chapter Chair Clayton Truder. Clayton, how you doing, man? I haven't seen you in way too long.
Oh, doing very well. Thanks for having me tonight. Jerry, congratulations again on the book. I love that you read a section from the book. It shows off what a great prose stylist you are, and also the fantastic attention to detail you have. My question is more about just the process of doing the book. January 2021 is when you get back into writing this book. You've had a fairly quick turnaround for getting the book out in that, I have a sense of how long a lot of that stuff takes. Can you tell me a bit about your writing process and research process since you restarted working on that book?
It was frenetic, to say the least. What happened was, like I'd said, I'd already written a couple of chapters 20 years earlier. Now, I basically scrapped those. I don't even know that I had worthwhile. All I had left were interviews, typed interviews from the handful of people that I mentioned. But I had gathered some research in the years since then, even when I was working on my first book in, say a Wild Hair, Thank You Baseball Reference, and this kind of thing. When things like when websites like this became available, and things like newspapers.com became available, and Ancestry, every once in a while I would go and check something, and that would charge my interest a little bit. And a lot of that stuff wound up. So from that point, say from January 21 to trying to remember when I turned in the manuscript, would have been May 23. And so it was published in April 24. And that was a fairly fast turnaround for a publisher, right? So in that 2 years there, it was a frenetic pace of also adding a lot of research. And Clayton, I don't know if you've ever done this. I got to the point where I thought, okay, this is enough to really get started with. And I started writing, but then continued researching while writing. So there would be things that would, because I started with an outline that, and I try to stick with an outline, but I also keep an open mind that there may be things while I'm writing that will occur to me that will demand a little more research and might even lead to other directions and other discoveries, accidental things. I mean, that's not the best way. I know it's not the best way because there are things that have happened. I realize this too. When I'm done, I need to be done. And yeah, I don't know if you've experienced this, any of you all who write too, but since then, other things have come to light that I'm like, why didn't I include that in the book? Because I didn't know it, and we can't know everything, but that's part of just being a student for life, right? Is we just have to keep, that's part of embracing that, being a student for life. But that was basically the process. I mean, I had some stuff to get me started. And when I gathered a little bit more that I thought I could really crank out in fact, crank out enough that I could reach out to another publisher. In this case, it was University of Nebraska Press. And as y'all know, they're a great base. They do some wonderful sports books, including I love Loserville. That's one of my favorite of the last few years. It's a non-baseball book that they've done, but again, they do a good job with books that have a sports theme. And I reached out to them after I had what I thought was enough to share, some writing that I thought was good enough to share, and stuck with them and the whole way. And while writing, and then when we reached an agreement with about a year left to the deadline, essentially. And I was a good way through at that point. So I was in a good place to where, oh, no problem. But doesn't mean I wasn't still writing up until the end. I was. I found a way to keep writing and cutting up until the very end. And I was fortunate to have a daughter who's brilliant, good editor. She majored in editing in college. I mean, she doesn't do that for a living now, but she's edited both of my books. And did more, just as important, and I was going to say more important to me because I don't like it, but indexing. I mean, I can do it, but I'm not a big fan of it, and she's great at it. And so she did those things. So those were all part of the process as well.
Thank you. I love hearing about writers' experiences. I find it very inspiring myself just to see what other people are just on their own doing as they're getting their books together. Thanks for sharing that.
And as you know, balancing it with the first string job, right? I mean, so all of those things I mentioned were things that I would do on weekends or in the evening, which helped to have, again, with internet connections, to be able to do research at 12 at night. That's something you could do if I went to Cooperstown or something, and sorry, the library closes at whatever, but
7 o'clock.
Anyway,
yeah.
So yeah, thank you. Good question too, though, about the process. Yeah.
Roger Kathman had a question. He was next in line. I'm going to jump to him, and after him, I'm going to duck over to Paul. You had something you wanted to show, right?
Yeah. I just want to show you. See if everybody can you see that? Have I got the right? Have I got it up far enough?
There it is. If you look real close there. Look real close. He's got a
that's
1952 Topps Johnny Mize.
I have that one. And I gave one away as an early event. We had an event called was it Books with Appeal? Anyway, it was an authors gathering in Atlanta, in one of the Atlanta suburbs, a restaurant. And we were asked if we wanted to bring something for raffle, and that's what I brought.
That's awesome.
That's
awesome.
a great card, man. I got another one. I didn't want to give my only one away, so I got two of them.
Yeah, it's pretty cool because I lived in southwestern Ontario. We were always Detroit Tiger fans. So as a kid, you got to remember, I'd be 10 years old then. We traded the Yankee cards for the Detroit Tiger cards. So I really believe that the Mickey Mantle card is was somebody else besides me. I probably traded them for Hoot Evers or Jerry Pretty or something like that. But yeah, but I do have 143 of them, and Hank Aaron rookie card. But hey, I really enjoyed that. Okay, turn it over to somebody else.
Roger, up.
I'm a huge Cincinnati Reds fan. They actually bought Johnny Mize in 1934, and before the season started in 35, they returned him because he couldn't stay healthy.
There's a chapter, a devoted chapter in the, that's one of the things that I should have put a slide in with that. I didn't have time to do that, but I found some cool pictures of Mize in a Reds uniform. He spent all of spring training with them. He spent, when they let, this is what happened. He had hurt himself in 34. He had a rare injury. It was, they thought it was like a pulled muscle. It was worse than that. He had this calcification. It was, I'll butcher the name of what I figured out what it, the name, what the Latin name of it probably is, but it's a condition that typically happens to people who rode in the cavalry, this kind of thing. It's a horseman's sort of disease, a pelvic, like a calcium growth that's extremely painful. And what happened is he hurt himself going after, he was a hustling ball player early in his career. So he's going after a ball, he hurts himself, or no, he's running to first, trying to stretch a double, he hurts himself, and they think it's a pulled muscle, which it most certainly is, but then they discover this condition. But they don't do anything about it. He continues playing, he continues to hit a ton, and then the Reds buy him for $55,000 in December of 34. And there's been a lot of trade talk anyway. They were like, because the Cardinals were always peddling. They had a deep, deep farm system. And Mize was on the chopping block, and they were talking, somebody's going to pick him up. And the Reds were in a buying mood, and they bought a lot of guys. And Mize was one of them. And they bought him for like $55,000, a pretty good number for the time. And they were all excited. But there was the caveat. He had to prove that he was healthy enough, or they could return him to the Cardinals, money back guarantee, essentially. But they had until opening day. And so they kept Mize until the day before opening day. And he hit a ton. I love that chapter because what happens is you find out that he's setting records for spring training. Like he's hitting the longest home runs they've seen at Plant Field, where the Reds trained. And he's doing all these things. He's using a new glove that he essentially helped invent, similar to the glove that Greenberg had, that they both essentially borrowed from a minor leaguer, the glove that we know of today, the oven mitt sort of look that sort of started with this minor league, an aging minor league player that both Hank Greenberg and Johnny Mize were inspired by. And he's wearing this glove as a Red, and he's playing great, but it's obvious that he's in pain. It's obvious he can't hide the fact he's hitting 400, but every time he bends down to tie his shoes, it hurts. And so MacPhail, who was Larry MacPhail and Charlie Dressen wanted to keep him, I think. MacPhail was like, we can't take a chance. So the day before opening day, they send him back to the Cardinals, and the Reds had to settle for Frank McCormick.
Yeah, that's a tough settle, huh?
I know, exactly.
Right?
They had to settle for another 300 hitter with power.
Gee
He
whiz.
got hurt, otherwise he'd be in the Hall of Fame.
That's true.
Exactly. Although he did win a Most Valuable Player award in 41, I think that should have gone to Pete Reiser or Johnny Mize, or maybe in 40. It might have been, but 40. Anyway, McCormick was great. It's not like the Reds lost anything. They wind up winning a pennant a couple of years after all of this, all of these shenanigans.
I just think of him in Crosley Field, a small ballpark.
Oh, can you imagine?
Do you know what he did to Paul? Derringer was his baby. I mean, he hit Derringer like there was no tomorrow. The year that, what was the first year the Reds won the pennant then? Was it 39?
39.
That year when Derringer and Walters both won like 20-some-5 games, they were both big winners. Mize hit like 5-something off of Derringer. He just destroyed him. And whereas Walters held him to like a mere 315 or something. But that was, yeah, but he did hit well in Crosley Field. That's a great point.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ryan McClanahan, did you want to get in here?
I did. I was really looking forward to this, and thank you so much. He's one of my favorite ball players, and there was an incident, I guess, a personal privacy incident involving Johnny Mize back in 1941, where he ended up suing Gum Products Inc. here in Boston. And I'm just wondering if you knew anything about that court case, because I think it's the first time I think that a ball player took a company to court.
Wow, I didn't. It was that like a baseball card over baseball card stuff.
Yeah, the 1941 double play. Actually, I wrote an article about it, just on the legal aspect.
Oh, I hope you'll share it with. Could you email that to me or put it in the
Yeah.
chat? I would love to read
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. I'll send it your way.
I love it, man. Thank you, bro. I'll put I'm gonna put my or maybe you shared it, Bruce, by email. If you want to share my email,
You can put that in the chat, or you can I can send it out if anybody wants to get in touch with Grilly, with Jerry.
Remember him?
Directly. Remember Grilly?
I remember. He puts
get a hold of me and I'll get you in touch with him. Ryan, the cards that Mize sued over. When was this?
1941, the double play.
I wonder, was this the part of the set that the woman in Manchester, New Hampshire recently found in the walls of her house?
That's the other set. That's the 1941 play wall.
That's the play ball set. That's right.
Yeah, double play is black and it's kind of like black and white.
That's right.
Oh, I might have a play. I have a Connie Mack from that era, and I think it's a black and white, and I wonder if it's that set that you're talking about.
Could be.
Yeah, it's just cool. I love it that it's a Connie Mack card. I mean, but that's beautiful. And see, I keep hearing these amazing tales of Johnny. I'd like it to do a second edition with all these stories. And then, there's stuff that I cut out that's come to bother me. Little scenes that I cut that for space that I wish I had kept, as I was saying before with Clayton, that, boy, you can keep knocking yourself silly about the stuff you cut, about the choices you make. But that is a very cool story. I didn't know, but I could see that happening because Mize was I wasn't going to, not so much litigious as he was money conscious, because he came from poverty, for one thing, and he always felt that he was taken advantage of, being signed at 17, and he said years later, I should have held out. I might have got, signed by the Indians if I had waited another year for a lot more money, that kind of thing. So I could see this happen. I could totally imagine him wanting to sue baseball card company or gum company, and and he was ahead of his time too, so DH before his time.
Joe Ross, you're up. Joe, how you doing tonight?
Not bad, thank you.
You're on.
Jerry, thank you. Great program. Quick question is all I had. Are you planning a big cat too?
Not yet, but with all of the cool stuff I'm finding out, I could totally do an expanded edition. I build upon what's already there. Because there's all this cool stuff. I might have mentioned this to Bruce earlier. This is a true story that came about totally again by accident. I found out there was a group in Kingston, New York.
Yes.
So about halfway between New York City and Cooperstown, almost on the way. There's a group of Johnny Mize fans, like a fan club. When Mize was having a hard time getting into the Hall of Fame, these guys picketed for him. They would send letters to the Veterans Committee and I think the sports writers before that, and they would keep Johnny up to date. They'd tell him, hey, Johnny, we're fighting for you, man, that kind of thing. And he was kind to them. He would write to them and thank you for your support. And when he had his induction at the Hall of Fame, he invited them to come, be there as this group of guys from Kingston, New York, to come be his guests, along with his friends from Demorest, Georgia. So it's just interesting, the stories that are emerging once you open a Pandora's box about an interesting person or interesting life.
What is the one story that you had to cut that you wish you'd have kept in the book?
You know,
Ah.
there are two short ones I'll give you
Okay.
because I've been perseverating about them lately. The one is and it's I kept the story in it, but I feel like excuse me, I made the wrong choice in how I cut some of the heart out of it that explained a little bit more. It's a scene where Mize is having a terrible slump. He's hitting like 260 at the All-Star break. It's at the late 30s, and they've benched him. Frank Frisch has benched him, and think about your crappy play. And he's got some bum in there playing for him. And the only time he plays is he gets to come in pinch hit once in a while. And he comes out and he pinch hits and he gets a double, like a great base. But the Cardinals are playing like crap for the 3 weeks that he's benched. He's benched for like 2 or 3 weeks, at least 18 games. And so all this to say, he's depressed. He hit a double, but they still lost the game with him stranded on second. And he's driving home and he's sitting at a light. It's rush hour traffic because, it's after a day game in St. Louis. And this guy pulls up beside him and rolls down the window and says, hey, hey, John. He says, great hit today. I'll bet you'll be back in the starting lineup tomorrow. And I just love that. I don't know why I cut that scene. I kept most of the fact that, that he worked his way back into but there's a little more to it than that. And I'm embellishing on it like I did with that Boston scene I read. And I mean embellishment based on stuff that happened and it's reported on. But the other one was a small thing, but it illustrated how powerful Branch Rickey was in all of baseball. And it takes place when Mize was in Elmira. And at that time, the Depression was in full swing, like 1932. And ball clubs, especially the minor leagues, were disappearing. And they're cutting salaries, like an entire month's salary for a whole ball club was like $2,000 or $2,500 for 15 guys. It was terrible. It started out like it was low to start with, but Rickey would go to the towns where his team had. So he goes to Elmira and he has a Kiwanis meeting or whatever the city. And he says, if we want to keep a ball club in Elmira, we need to lower these salaries. So they basically lower them from like 3,500 to 2,000, for that year. But I cut some of that stuff out because a lot of it just didn't necessarily push Mize's. I could allude to it without getting into the weeds, but I loved some of it. There was some neat minor league stuff that I really liked, but if you all know who Donald Honig is, the writer, I'd sent him a couple of early stuff, and his advice was, he says, cut some of the minutia stuff, and I'm like, I trust the guy, some of it I did, some of it I kept, but some of it I totally did. I did need to keep some of it, but I wanted to get somebody's opinion on that. And anyway, so those were two that kind of bugged me.
This is SABR. We love minutia.
I know. This is the thing, what we do. And Don writes novels as well as, or, he's retired now, but wrote novels as well as baseball books. So he can write all of the things.
I mean, really, come on. Ian Braun, I haven't seen you in way too long, my friend. How you doing?
Good to see you, Bruce.
Good to see you, my friend. You're up.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you so much. I've always been interested in Johnny Mize, just a ball player. One of the things that interests me is the amount of time it took him to be selected into the Hall of Fame, and I think he has a good argument. Certainly, at the time he retired, to be the greatest first baseman in the National League ever. Why do you think the writers didn't elect him, and it took so long to get in the Hall of Fame? I know you touched on a group that was championing him to be in the Hall of Fame, but why the lack of support?
That's the $1 million question. I think there are a few reasons. Of course, some of them are in the book, and also as more I've studied as I go on, I think one reason is something that one of the guys asked earlier on, like he was traded from the Cardinals, for example, and then or sold, and then from the Giants. So he played for 3 different teams. So it's not like he had a career where, oh, Mize spent 14 years with the Cardinals and did all these things, and right. So it was 5, 6 years, 5. So I think that was part of it. The fact that each city, say, for example, set of writers, the guys in St. Louis will be like, well, he was only here for 5 or 6 years, and that's not enough for me to really base it on. And same with New York and the people who cover it. That's part of it, I think. Another part of it is probably personality. Mize he could be famously gruff or misunderstood, because based on some of the writers I've talked to who knew him, he wasn't as much gruff as he would, he would come across as that way. If they got to talking about baseball, he loved to talk about it. He was a real, he was a scientist about it. He'll talk hitting all day. But there was a sense that he wasn't as popular with the press. He just wasn't. So there's a popularity. And then there are the rules that occurred, that didn't help him. For example, when he retired in 53, the rule was that a player was eligible the next year. It changed the next year to the 5-year rule that we know now, which I'm not sure if the 5-year rule was in place for a while before then. It might have been, but for a while it was basically no waiting list. There were even columns that writers would say, well, Mize is going to be on my ballot next year, in 53 when he announced his retirement. Well, then they changed it to 5 years. Well, when his 5-year waiting period was up, the rule had been changed to every other year for induction. So then he kind of had that going against him. So he kept slipping between the cracks. And it also happened, I would also suggest anybody who hasn't read it yet, Joe Posnanski's Baseball 100, terrific book.
Great book.
Great book, has a great chapter on Mize in it, which I used for my book as a resource. I told Joe I was, and actually used to work with Joe many years ago. But he got into, I thought, some of the best detail as far as the writers and the choices they were making in those years. And they were making some, what they basically were doing was not making any choices. They were essentially acting as a sort of, a barrier. And very few people were getting in on first ballot, if any. Some famous names who, just didn't even get in on the first ballot. So that by the time Mize I think it's a 20-year from 53 to 70, by the time he just had never gotten more than 40-something% of the vote, I think it was. And then after his 5-year wait, or whatever it was, I think he made it in the 2nd or 3rd year of the veterans voting. But so a 28-year wait, which I think is one of the more ridiculous ones, not the worst. The worst is Archie Vaughan, and I think Posnanski makes a good case for that as well. Archie Vaughan waiting was ridiculous. That how that guy slipped through the cracks, I don't know. You make all kind of excuses for all these guys that why they didn't make it. Mize was. Some of the guys said he wasn't much of a fielder, but if you look at his numbers from his first, 7, 8, 9 years, they were pretty good. He was up among the best in the league. Some of the guys who's older guys at the time, memories failed them, frankly. They said he didn't hustle. He led the league in triples one year. He stole home. He led the league in doubles one year. He scored runs like a Maury Wills type. He was certainly not a Maury Wills type, but the man hustled. And so I just feel like by the time the voters came, the last but not least in on that good question is that his last 5 years was as a Yankee, and he was a part-time player, a pinch hitter. Nobody elects pinch hitters into the Hall of Fame. So the lasting memory for many of the writers, especially maybe some of the younger and middle-aged guys, were, I remember him. He was a Yankee. He sat on the bench and would play every 3rd game as a pinch hitter. So I think there were a number of reasons why Mize slipped through the cracks. I don't know why Archie Vaughan slipped through the cracks.
Mysteries of the balloting. Alex stays in the chat, has a great comment about similarity scores between Johnny Mize and several players: Dick Allen, Lance Berkman, Paul Goldschmidt, 3 of the examples he gives. I'm going to go to our chapter librarian, Molly. You're up.
Jerry, I just wanted to say thank you for coming tonight and sharing your beautiful book with us. And I'm looking forward to officially putting it in the library catalog tomorrow.
Nice.
It's been up in his office waiting for this meeting, so it goes in the catalog
Right here.
tomorrow.
Right here. I got it. It's right here.
Yay. Nice. Thank you guys for having me here. I appreciate this.
It really has been lovely to have you, so thank you for coming.
I
Joe
love it.
Ross.
Two quick things, Jerry. I got to tell you, if I were editing and writing your book or publishing your book, there is no way I would have let you not put in that story you told at the beginning about the guy pulling up next to him on the street
I know.
at the streetlight. That absolutely would have been in that book if I were publishing it.
You know, I blame myself because in my frenzy to finish the manuscript and to cut words, you know, I was cutting all the stuff that, so unfortunately, some stuff wound up, it was like using a lawnmower to do a haircut, you know, and just bad choice of tools.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is about the Hall of Fame. Personality is a big part of the voting, as I'm sure you know. The one that always comes to mind for me is that Ted Williams did not get 100% of the vote when he was first eligible.
Right.
I always find that I don't know how you could possibly do that.
Yeah, and Ted, I think, made it surprisingly on the first ballot. So it wasn't just about writers not liking you. You know, Ted was also a war hero. Ted was a big personality. Johnny was not. There were very big similarities between Ted and Johnny in the way they approached hitting. And it's one of the things Ted liked about Mize was, you know, Mize was very analytical about it, didn't swing at bad pitches and so on. But you know, of course, years apart, Ted is in the upper echelon. But yeah, but I make the argument in the book that with Hank Greenberg and Johnny Mize, because they were just a few years apart, American League, National League, you know, they both knew each other and respected each other. But Hank got in 25 years before Johnny. And if you look at their numbers, there are a lot of similarities. And I tried to make the argument that it's not that, you know, Hank doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame by the writers, but I didn't think Hank was 25 years better than Johnny Mize. You know, I just wanted to make the point that it wasn't so much Hank, it was the fact that Johnny probably waited 25 years too long to get into Cooperstown.
Last one for tonight is Dixie Tarango. Dixie, you're up, man.
Hello, everyone. Well, I will tell you why Archie Vaughan was left off. Archie Vaughan played for Pittsburgh, for one. Archie Vaughan was never a guy to toot his own horn about anything. And Archie Vaughan died in 1952 at age 40-something. And as soon as he died, he was just forgotten almost immediately.
Apparently.
That's why it just kept going and going and going. And then suddenly no one cared anymore.
He drowned.
Yes, right, he did.
Mm-hmm.
Eagleville, California.
So you feel like, you know, you almost feel like if that was to happen today to a player and a 290 hitter, they would have put him in the Hall of Fame immediately.
Well, he was a 318 hitter.
I know he was a great hitter. This is my point. He was a terrific hitter. You know, anyway, I don't understand it. All of those sound, yeah, great, but it doesn't explain to me why he waited 100 years to get in the Hall of Fame. But I get it. He just sort of disappeared, and in the Pirates, right? Yeah, I mean, he wasn't in New York. He was a short time in Brooklyn, and Leo hated him, you know. Anyway.
All right, Jerry, tell us how to get that book.
You can get it anywhere you get books, you know, like all the usual suspects, all the usual places, and look around for deals. You can get it from me. I have a handful now. I probably have about 10 of them or so on hand. And I usually try to keep some on hand. But if you're patient, you know, and I mean, I wouldn't make you wait months, but I'm glad to send you signed copies. And I always put a baseball card in them. I did this with my first book, a lot more than I did with this book, but I would put baseball cards. I started the tradition of sending a baseball card as a bookmark, because the subject of my first book was a huge baseball fan, in addition to be a musical genius. But with this one, it makes sense to have baseball cards. So the ones I mail out, I put a baseball card in it. And if you tell me your favorite team, I'll try to find a player from the favorite team, and I personalize it. And those were like $33. I use PayPal, or you send a check, that kind of thing. Or again, if you do it through the usual suspects out in the digital world, I can get you I'll send you a baseball card. I don't have a way to sign it, but I'll see if I can get some book plates or something like that I can sign and send. I did that for the first book too, but the publisher provided book plates for all that. So I might have to reach out to Nebraska Press and see if I can grab some of those. But those are the best ways to get them. I hope if you haven't read it yet, you take a look, and always any feedback, good, bad, or indifferent, is all good. And I just really appreciate you guys giving me, and all y'all giving me, a chance to come talk about it.
Well, this has been fabulous, and you've been a great guest. We really appreciate you doing this, Jerry. Thanks a lot, my friend.
Thank you all.
So, all right, let's talk about next week here for just a minute. We're going to have two big meetings planned for next week. First up, on Monday, August 26th, fellow SABR member Mark Jacob joins us to give us his Malloy Conference presentation on Jake Powell, the first major leaguer to be disciplined for a racist statement or action in 1938. And Wednesday, August 28th, the new East Coast Cooperative, made up of 6 Northeast chapters, will bring you another fellow SABR member, Matthew Prigge, and his SABR 52 presentation, The Baseball Card 300 Hitter, an Endangered Species. Each meeting begins at 7 p.m. Eastern and is in the new meeting booklet sent out in the Monday message. So sign up today and don't miss those meetings. And finally, if you're watching this on YouTube and you like what we're doing, please like and subscribe to our channel to be alerted to each of our uploads. And if you're a baseball fan watching this and you're not already, you need to join SABR, the Society for American Baseball Research, the premier baseball community, offering an amazing buffet of options to explore your fandom. SABR boasts more than 35 different research communities and over 80 regional chapters and innumerable opportunities to connect with baseball minds across the world, like all these guys here this evening. For more information, go to sabr.org/join today. Jerry Grillo, you're awesome. I appreciate you. You're getting a round of applause and some thumbs up from a lot of heavy hitters here.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to get everybody out of here. We're going to see you next Monday and next Wednesday. Have a good night, everybody.